was already in her hand before the man finished lying to her. That was how Adaeze Okonkwo moved through the world, ahead of everyone else, always, because she had learned before she turned 12 that the price of being even 1 second too slow was a price she could not afford to keep paying. She set the gun down on the mahogany table slowly, deliberately, the way a woman who does not need to threaten anyone sets something down. The four men watching her from across the table stopped breathing. She picked up her glass of Remy Martin instead, took one measured sip and said, very quietly, "Try that again, and I will turn this room into a story your families will be too ashamed to tell." Nobody tried it again. That was the night they called her Eze in the papers for the first time. Not her name. A title. A thing a person becomes when the city decides it has run out of room to contain them. She was 27 years old. She controlled 6 ports of entry across the West African coast. She had 43 people on her personal payroll, and not one of them could tell you where she actually slept at night. She had built something extraordinary. She had built it out of hunger and fury and a refusal so deep it had calcified inside her chest into something harder than ambition. A refusal to be one of the women she had watched disappear into poverty on Ajagunle's streets, swallowed whole, unremembered. She remembered all of them. That was the thing nobody understood about Adaeze. She was not cold. She was the opposite of cold. She burned so hot for the people she had lost that she had learned to translate it, all that grief, all that love with nowhere to land, into something that looked, from the outside, like ruthlessness. Her mother had died of a treatable infection in a public hospital that had run out of antibiotics. Adaeze was 15. She had sat in that corridor for 9 hours watching the nurses move past like ghosts, and she had decided, in the specific silence that follows catastrophe, that she would never again be a person who could not afford the thing that mattered. Never! She would find another way. She found it. The Interpol file on her ran to 312 pages by the time Min Jun Park was assigned to it. He was 31. He had closed 4 major trafficking networks in Southeast Asia, and he had a reputation inside the Lyon office for being the kind of analyst who did not quit. His supervisor slid the folder across the desk on a Tuesday morning and said, "She's a ghost. 2 years, 3 teams, nothing. You're the last idea we have." Min Jun had looked at the photograph on the cover, a woman captured from a distance at a Lagos waterfront, her face half turned, something in her expression so present and so privately anguished that he had stared at it longer than a professional was supposed to, and he had said, "I'll take it." He spent the first 6 months learning her from the outside in, the network architecture, the shipment patterns, the front companies and shell accounts. He was good at it, the puzzle-solving part, the cartography of crime. But Adaeze Okonkwo was not a puzzle. She was a person, and the more he read, the more he understood that the file had been assembled by people who had never once considered that. They had catalogued what she did. Nobody had asked why. He started asking why. He tracked down women from Ajagunle who had known her as a girl. He sat in the back of a church in Abuja Meta where her mother was still remembered, listening to an old woman describe a 15-year-old who had washed the body herself because there was no money for the mortuary. He reread the financial records and saw, threaded through the offshore accounts and the dirty money, a pattern of payments to an orphanage in Mushin, to a women's shelter in Ikeja, to anonymous medical accounts for families who would never know where the money came from. He sat with that for a long time. She was not a criminal who felt nothing. She was a woman who felt everything and had run out of legal ways to act on it. He told no one in Lyon what he was beginning to understand. He moved to Lagos on the cover of a cultural exchange program, and he watched her city learn itself around him for 6 months before he allowed himself to think about making contact. By then he knew her coffee order, her running route, the specific posture she adopted in public, shoulders back, chin level, the controlled stillness of someone performing invulnerability so long it had become its own kind of prison. He knew she ate alone. He knew she left every event before the real intimacy started, always the first to the door, always the woman in the back of the car before the laughter reached its natural peak. He knew, with a certainty that embarrassed him professionally, that she was one of the loneliest people he had ever studied. They met at a gallery opening in Victoria Island. She had funded the artist, a 22-year-old from Surulere who painted enormous canvases of Lagos women with their eyes wide open, refusing to look away from themselves. Adeze stood in front of the largest one for a long time, and Minjun stood nearby pretending to read a catalogue, and eventually she said, without looking at him, "You've been watching me for 4 minutes. Most people last 40 seconds. "The painting is good," he said. "So is the view from this angle." She finally turned. She looked at him with those eyes that he had studied in photographs for a year and found, to his complete destabilization, that a photograph had not come close. "You are either very brave or very stupid," she said. "Probably both." "Min Jun, I work in cultural development." She knew he was lying. She could read lies the way some people read weather, instantly, in the body, before the mind had processed the signals. But there was something underneath the lie that interested her more than the lie itself. There was a man who looked at her like she was a person, not an asset, not a threat, not a myth, a person. She had forgotten, somewhere in the empire building, what that felt like. "A days, she said, and offered her hand. And that was the beginning of the thing that would unravel everything she had spent 15 years constructing. They met 7 more times before she stopped pretending it was coincidence. He was careful. She gave him that. Careful in the way of someone who respected her intelligence, who never pushed, who asked questions and actually waited for the answers. He told her about growing up in Busan, about his mother's restaurant, about the smell of doenjang jigai on winter mornings, and how distance had turned it into the specific fragrance of homesickness. She listened to him talk about missing a place and felt something shift under her ribcage, something she had sealed so tightly she had forgotten the seal was there. She missed her mother every single day. She had never said that out loud to anyone. She said it to him on a Tuesday night on a rooftop in Lekki with the Atlantic burning orange below them. And when the words came out of her, she felt the particular vertigo of a person who has been holding their breath for 12 years and has just, without planning to, exhaled. "She would have been disappointed in me," Adeze said. She did not look at him. "Not in what I have, in how I got it." Minjun was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you believe that? Or is that what you tell yourself so you have a reason to keep the distance?" She looked at him then. Nobody had ever asked her that. Nobody had ever been close enough, or brave enough, or simply present enough to ask her that. "I believe," she said carefully, "that I have done things I cannot undo, and I have built my whole life in the direction away from the person who would have to live with that." "What does she want?" he asked. "The person you've been running from. What does she want?" The answer came out of Adese's mouth before her defenses could close around it. "Something real. Something I didn't have to buy or threaten or build. Something that just is. Something clean." The Atlantic went dark below them. Neither of them moved. She found out who he was in January. Not because he slipped. He was too good for that. But because she was better. She had a contact inside 3 European law enforcement agencies, and she had run Minjun's photograph through all of them the week after the gallery. A precaution so automatic she had almost forgotten she'd done it. The response came back on a Monday evening while she was sitting in her car outside the Mushin orphanage, watching children play in the early dark. Interpol analyst. 2 years on her file. The architect of the operation that had been quietly building a case around her network for 24 months. She sat with that information for 4 hours. She did not call anyone. She did not do anything. She sat with the specific devastation of a woman who had finally opened a door and found out the door had been installed by someone who needed to walk through it for reasons that had nothing to do with her. Except, she thought about the way he had looked at her on that rooftop. She thought about a man who had spent 2 years reading her file and had, at some point, started asking why instead of just cataloguing what. She thought about the orphanage payments he could not possibly know about, the women's shelter, the medical accounts, all of it scrubbed from anything an analyst would see. She thought about the fact that she was here, right now, sitting outside this building in the dark, not because it was strategic, because it mattered to her. She thought, what if he saw that too? She called him. "Come to the address I'm sending you. Come alone. If you bring anyone, I will know before they reach the gate." He came alone. They sat across from each other in a room with no one else in it. and they stopped pretending. It was the most brutal conversation of her life, and she had sat across from men who had held guns to other people to make a point. "How long?" she asked. "The file, 2 years. The feelings," he said. "Somewhere around month 4. I know how that sounds." "It sounds like a conflict of interest." "It is," he said. "It also sounds like the truth. Both of those things are true at the same time." "You came here to dismantle everything I built." "Yes." "And now?" He looked at her steadily. "Now I don't know. I know that I read 300 pages about you, and somewhere in those pages I found a person I was not expecting. Someone who built the wrong thing for the right reasons and has been paying the interest on that decision every single day since. I know I have no professional standing left in this room, and I know that I would rather sit here and tell you the truth than walk out of here with my career intact." Adeze looked at him for a long time. The fortress she had built around herself, every stone of it, the control and the distance and the gun always within reach. She felt it in that moment not as strength, but as weight. All of it. Weight. She had been carrying it for so long she had mistaken the exhaustion for character. "I am not a good person," she said. "You are not a simple person," he said. "That's not the same thing." "The things I've done, Minjun." "I know what you've done. I've read every page." "Then you know there's no version of this where I'm not—" "I know," he said quietly. "I also know about the orphanage, the shelter, the medical accounts. None of that was in my file. I found it on my own, after I stopped being objective." She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she said, "I don't know how to be the person I actually am inside all of this. I built it so it would protect me, and it worked. Nothing can touch me. Nothing I want can get inside. The Empire is the wall, and you are on the wrong side of it." The choice did not arrive as a single dramatic moment. It arrived, the way the most important choices do, as an accumulation, a slow filling up of the cup until the night it spilled. It was 3 months after the rooftop room, 3 months of a silence between them that was not empty. 3 months of a day's waking at 4 in the morning and lying very still in the dark and asking herself the question she had been asking since she was 15 years old. Only now it had changed shape. It used to be, how do I survive? Now it was, survive into what? The Empire was expanding. A new route through the Sahel, a new contact in Marseille, more money than she could ever spend accumulating in accounts that existed to confuse and deflect. Her lieutenants moved around her like planets in a functioning solar system, and she sat at the center of it and felt, underneath the efficiency and the power, the specific hollowness of a woman who has achieved everything she set out to achieve and found the achievement empty because she is the only one inside it. Her mother had wanted one thing for her, not money, not power, not the respect of men who feared her. She had said it once, on an ordinary evening in their 2-room flat in Ajagunla, said it with the simple certainty of someone who had thought about it her whole life. "Eze, I want you to be free. Not free from hunger, so free inside. The kind that doesn't cost you your sleep." Adeze had not slept well in 11 years. She made one call, to Minjun, 3 words, "Come and talk." And when he came, she laid it out in front of him. Not a confession, not a plea, but a woman staring at the architecture of her own life with clear eyes for the first time and seeing all the places the foundation was rotten. "I will cooperate," she said. "Full cooperation, names, routes, accounts, everything. But not because you are Interpol, because I am tired, because I have been building this wall for 15 years, and I finally understand I built it facing the wrong direction, and because my mother would not recognize the person I became in here, and I would like, before I run out of time, to become someone she would." Minjun looked at her. He had prepared for every version of this meeting. Her silence, her anger, her using the information as leverage. He had not prepared for this, for a woman who had decided entirely on her own terms to choose the life over the Empire. "It won't be clean," he said. "The legal process, the exposure." "I know," she said. "Nothing I touch has ever been clean. But I can start now. I can make the next thing clean." He reached across the table, not as an analyst, as the man who had spent 2 years finding her and found somewhere inside the file someone he had not expected to love and could not stop. She looked at his hand for a moment, at the simple, terrifying offer of it, and then she took it. The empire dismantled slowly, and then all at once. The arrests came in waves across 4 countries over 6 months. Her lieutenants gave statements that protected her cooperation agreement. The Marseille contact tried to run and was stopped at the border. The ports went quiet. The shell companies emptied. 312 pages of file became a living testimony, and Adayes sat in rooms with lawyers and prosecutors and spoke in the flat, detailed voice of someone delivering an accounting they have long since made peace with. She did not minimize. She did not perform remorse. She simply told the truth, which was that she had done it, and she had known it was wrong. And she had done it anyway because she had been 15 and furious and starving. And then she had kept doing it because stopping felt like dying. And then one day, she had looked up and found that the life she had built was the one she was most afraid of living inside. She lost the money, she lost the network, she lost the penthouse in Lecce and the accounts in Zurich and the specific status that had made men who frightened other men step aside when she entered a room. She lost the version of herself that had believed power was the same thing as safety. She kept the orphanage. She negotiated it into her agreement. The payments, rerouted, legitimized, continuing. She kept the women's shelter. She kept, eventually, the man who had read her entire file and loved the person he found in it anyway, which was the most disorienting miracle of her adult life. On the morning her cooperation agreement was finalized, she drove alone to Ajegunle. She parked outside the building where she had grown up, smaller than memory, the paint still the same faded yellow. And she sat there for a long time with the window down, listening to the neighborhood sound of itself, the generators and the voices, and the particular music of a place that refuses to be quiet. She thought about her mother. She thought about a 15-year-old girl who had decided that survival was the same thing as winning and had spent the next 15 years finding out it wasn't. She thought, I am still here, diminished and exposed and beginning again at 30, which is terrifying in a completely different way than the terror she had always known. But here, present in her own life for the first time, not performing it from behind glass. She thought, this is what clean feels like. Not pure, not finished, just honest, just herself, unfortified, on the right side of her own walls at last. She started the car. She drove toward the future, which was small and uncertain and entirely, devastatingly hers.